Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending where you are joining us from. My name is Evgenia Kempinski, and we're here to speak about Sarajevo Haggadah, the true miracle on parchment. Let me start sharing my screen. And here we go. Today, we will speak about a book that made an extraordinary journey. It crossed much of Europe. It was born right here where I put this little pink heart in the north of Spain, in Barcelona. It made its way through Italy, we think through Venice, and ended up down here in Sarajevo, in the capital of Bosnia. So our plan today is to follow the steps of this manuscript and see what it can tell us about our past, about the life of Jews in medieval Spain, in medieval Italy, and maybe even in Bosnia. So we begin in Barcelona. Barcelona is one of the older cities on the territory of Spain. And we know for sure, okay, we believe that we know for sure that this very Haggadah was created in Barcelona. A little bit later, in a couple of minutes, I will show you how we know about that, what evidences we have. But what we know for sure absolutely is that Barcelona has unique and long Jewish history. We know that Jews came here already in Roman times. And you see today, Barcelona is the capital of Catalonia, and Catalonia is part of Spain. But the times that we speak about, the Middle Ages, the period when Jewish community flourished here, and the Haggadah that we're going to see was created, it was an independent state. It was called the Crown of Aragon. It was a union between Catalonia and Aragon, the Crown of Aragon, and it was extraordinarily successful and powerful state. It managed to conquer lots of lands, not only the south of the region, including Valencia, but also Majorca, but also Sardinia, Sicily, and half of Italy. And much of it became possible thanks to the Jewish support. The Jewish community of Catalonia and Barcelona flourished here, not for a long time, but flourished. It was wealthy and knowledgeable community that had very special relations with the king and supported the king. And thanks to that support, the crown of Aragon and Catalonia became one of the powerful, strong monarchies in Europe. Look at this map. On the left, the map on the left, it shows you the Jewish presence in Catalonia in 13th, 14th centuries. There were many communities in different towns around Catalonia, not only in Barcelona and Girona that are very well known today, but in Besalú, in Manresa, in Tarragona, in Tortosa, everywhere. In this map shows us only proper, complete communities. The community that had the Beit Din, that had butcher, that had mikveh, that had synagogue, that had school for boys, so all community institutions. The map on the right has even more dots. It's the same territory, it's Catalonia, but it shows us bigger and smaller Jewish communities. So it only shows us smaller towns and villages where, for example, 1, 2, or 3 Jewish families lived. So we see that here, Jews were able to settle in many different regions. And so many Jewish communities here were amazingly strong and very independent. Barcelona, this is the Roman history. Barcelona originally was built as a small port town. It was named Barquino, a small boat, by the Romans. And this is exactly the layout of that Roman town. Some of those Roman walls still exist. So when you come visit Barcelona, you can actually see some parts of the original Roman towns. You still walk down those original Roman streets. And the Jewish neighborhood was originally located on the territory of this Roman town Barquino. And when we come visit Barcelona today, and we want to see the former Jewish neighborhood of Barcelona, we come here. We come to the historical territory of the Roman city. It's in the old town of Barcelona, in so-called Gothic quarter, in the very, very, very center of it. Jewish quarter, I put here this red circle, historically was located in the very heart of the Roman town, very close to the Forum, to the big Roman temple. So Jews from the very beginning occupied significant place in Barcelona daily life. And then if we look at more of the modern maps, that's the Ciutat Vella, the old town. That's the most attractive part of Barcelona for the foreign visitors. That's where you have Gothic quarter with the most famous cathedral. That's exactly where we go to look for that original Roman town and for the Jewish quarter. It's very close. It's in between the Cathedral of Barcelona and the square of Saint Jacob, the famous king of Catalonia. And it's still true that we can come to Barcelona and walk down the exact streets of the Jewish quarter. These streets remember Jews that used to live here many, many years ago, because Barcelona got rid of its Jews in 1391. 1391 is the last year of the Jewish community of Barcelona. Since then and up to the modern times, there were no Jews here. But the streets are still there. The houses are still there. The walls are still there. The memory still exists of the Jewish community that once flourished here. Jews of Barcelona had very special relations with this king, James I, king of Aragon of the 13th century. In Jewish tradition, he's referred as Yaakov Arishan. He was smart enough to understand that Jews could support him. And it's not only finances. I mean, money is money. It's a very important thing, but Jews were cartographers. Jews knew how to make maps for the ships. Jews were very knowledgeable in navigation, in marine navigation. Jews had business connections with the other regions. Jews were knowledgeable in math, in physics, in astronomy. Jews were doctors. And the royal family was only treated by the Jewish doctors. They knew very well you better trust Jews than anybody else. So it was King James I who conquered those giant territories and who had his own personal relations with the Jewish community. It was not easy. Jews had no rights, only privileges, so that the life of Jews depended on the king. But he tried to defend the Jewish community as much as possible. And it's true that in the 13th century, 13th and 14th century, Jewish community flourished here, enjoying the independence, enjoying the ability to organize its own life, living here without the fear of exile, the fear of being expelled the other day. The king even defended the Jewish community against the Catholic Church, so that Jews could do whatever we consider important, not only our business activities, but the most important, the Jews were able to organize the studies, and the great Talmudic scholars and the great rabbis lived and worked here in Barcelona. How do we know that? For example, to give you a very simple, easy to understand example, and you will, why do I explain it? So that we may understand why exactly so many incredible manuscripts were created here in Barcelona. Look at this map here. This map shows us the connections of one person. His name was Shlomo ben Adret. He was the leader of the Jewish community of Barcelona and an incredible rabbi and a Talmudic scholar. This map shows us he shows his responses from all different regions, as far as Germany, as far as Bohemia, as far as France, as far as the land of Israel, as far as Crete, Morocco, Portugal. Jews from all these lands sent their questions to Shlomo ben Adret to receive his answers. When in the late 15th century in Rome, first, I think, 9 Hebrew books were printed. Among them, there were 2 books written by the Jewish scholars from Catalonia. One, the collection of responses by Shlomo ben Adret, and the second one, the commentary to the Torah by Moses ben Nachman. So this is the level. This is the quality of the Talmudic scholars, the level of the rabbis that we had here in Barcelona. No wonder that extraordinary manuscripts were created here. We know that today when we have at least 8 or 9 Haggadot that are believed to be created in Barcelona, especially in the middle of the 14th century. Haggadah is only one example of many other Jewish manuscripts that were created here. The problem with Jewish manuscripts is that we understand very clear that so many of them, the number that we can't even imagine, were lost throughout the centuries. Some were simply burnt down, and starting from the 13th century, after the infamous disputation in Paris, there was this new trend, new tradition of burning Jewish books and manuscripts, considering them to contain blasphemy against the Christian church, against the Catholic Church, against the Christianity. So many of the manuscripts were burned down in the fires, were lost during the exiles in the course of the centuries. So every manuscript we have today is extraordinarily valuable and precious because it can tell us so much about life that is, on one hand, far from us, but on the other hand, is still close to us. So we have several Haggadah that are known today that were produced here in Barcelona. And among them, of course, this famous golden Haggadah, that example of it you have on your screen. Why golden? Because see, the illustrations, they all have golden leaf. It's richly decorated with gold. That's why it's called golden Haggadah. You find it today in British Library. There is Sister. Why Sister Haggadah? Because it's exact copy of the Golden Haggadah. They're absolutely identical. They're similar. So it's called Sister Haggadah. There's Barcelona Haggadah, Sarajevo Haggadah that we're going to see in a second. A very interesting Prato Haggadah and several others. It's today that we all have a book, the Haggadah, at home. And when we come and sit at the Seder, every member of the family can have his or her personal Haggadah. It's today. It's only after the book printing was invented. Back in the 14th century, when manuscripts were handwritten and hand decorated, having the Haggadah with beautiful illustrations, it was extraordinarily expensive. It was amazing treasure. Only the wealthiest and the most respectful Jewish families could afford it. It was one of the biggest treasures the Jewish family could have. Very often, such Haggadah were used, for example, as a precious wedding gift that one family would present to another. Prater Haggadah, which can be found today in Theological Seminary Library in New York, is unique for a very specific reason. It is unfinished. Look at it. You have 2 pages from Prater Haggadah right now on your screen. The left one is finished. The words are carefully written and it's beautifully decorated with floral designs and some animals and the human faces and the bird and golden leaf was already put on. And the page on the right, see, it's unfinished. We don't know why it was abandoned. We have no information why exactly this Haggadah was never finished and still survives. But thanks to it, we can witness the process. We can touch the moment. We can understand the stages of work. How first the professional cipher had to write down every single word, and then how the illustrations were created. First with lines, then the color, then gold, several layers of it. So Prater Haggadah is extraordinarily interesting because how else could we witness the moment of work of the medieval artist? The origin of the manuscript. The best thing, what every scholar loves, is that when manuscript has something called colophon, it's the best thing ever. Colophon is usually put at the end of the manuscript, and so it's exactly the signature of the scriber, like we have it here in this Kennicott Bible from Oxford. The colophon here clearly says, in 1476, the famous Moses ibn Zaraba completed the work with the help of the illuminator Joseph ibn Haim in La Coruña in the northwestern Spain. Done. We know exactly when and where this very manuscript was created. And amazingly, we even know the name, not only of the scriber, but also of the artist. This is unique. So many Jewish manuscripts have no colophon. So colophon is this information of when and where the manuscript was created. So many of them have none of it. And then we have to rely on different evidences. For example, when we open the front page of Sarajevo Haggadah, and it's exactly on the left of your screen, aside of the text, and a wonderful ornamental design, what else we see on top of it? See this little thing, the stripes, those red and brown stripes. The page is clearly cut a little bit. It's not me. I didn't cut it. A little bit later, I'll tell you how it happened that some of the pages of Haggadah are a little bit cut on top and we don't see the full size of it. So this little emblem on top, we know it very well. It's this. It's the flag of Catalonia, yellow and red stripes. When you come visit Barcelona today, you see this flag everywhere. We have another Haggadah called Barcelona Haggadah from British Library from London, where we have this picture that you see on the right. It's an exodus. These are Jews leaving Egypt and see where they're going. They're marching to Catalonia. That's how you show your loyalty to the king. So this is the sign, this is the evidence, even though Sarajevo Haggadah has no colophon, but because it has the emblem of Catalonia, most scholars believe that it was created here in Catalonia, in Barcelona. There are 2 more emblems down below here. The one on the right is believed to be the emblem of one of the Jewish families here in Barcelona. So maybe that family, I mean, if it's the coat of arms of the family, then we might think that that family commissioned the Haggadah. And then this flower on the left is one of the emblems typical for the monarchs of Catalonia and Aragon. So the facts that we have: Sarajevo Haggadah, altogether 142 parchment folios. It's written on parchment, on the skin, on animal skin. For Jewish manuscripts, they were only selected animals used. You could not use any animal skin you wanted. It consists of two parts. Part one, illustrations. There are 69 miniatures, there are 69 images, and I'll show you some of them in a second. They begin with Genesis, they begin with the creation of the world and tell us the stories of Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel, Lot, Abraham and Isaac. Very specific attention is being given to the story of Joseph. Maybe the man who commissioned it was Joseph. We don't know. And then, of course, there are images that illustrate the story of the Pesach, the Exodus, and the elements of the Passover Seder. And part two consists of texts. There are texts from Haggadah, which are traditional to what we have in every other Haggadah, but also some of the lyrics, some of the poetry. Sephardic Jews, Spanish Jews are known for creating beautiful, beautiful poetry here. In the Middle Ages, they were wonderful, amazing Jewish poets. Their poetry we find of all different types, whether it be philosophical or lyrics. It could be anything about philosophy or about love. And every single page is beautifully, gorgeously decorated. It's not only Haggadot that are decorated in Jewish tradition with different images. Back to Kennicott Bible that we've already seen today, some of its pages are beautifully illuminated with the images of menorah and different floral designs and geometrical elements, sometimes animals or birds, and even human faces. Not too many, but at least few. We know that in the Middle Ages, there were different and sometimes even opposite opinions among the Jewish leaders, among the rabbinical authorities, whether to permit, for example, human faces, human bodies in the manuscripts or not. Some insisted that it was not permitted, that it was prohibited. Some considered it absolutely normal. It seems to be that Sephardic tradition was more accepted for having humans being represented in our manuscripts. As an example of the opposite tradition, of the northern tradition, would be, of course, this very well-known, famous bird's head Haggadah. Today, it's believed to be today it is the oldest Haggadah known for us. It's called bird's head Haggadah. It comes from South Germany, early 14th century. And every human being in this Haggadah is represented with the bird's head. And see, they have those triangle hats, typical Jewish hats from especially northern part of Europe. But here in Barcelona, there was no such issue, and the rabbis allowed Haggadot and other manuscripts to be decorated with human beings, with men and women. We have here two images on the screen. The one on the left, that's Christian image from the Bible, from French Bible of the 13th century. And the one on the right is from Golden Haggadah, early 14th century Barcelona. We clearly see the similarity. For example, the golden layout, the choice of colors, the figures are plain without perspective, the composition with architectural elements, the poses of people. There is absolutely clear similarity. One of the theories that was very much advertised back in the 19th century was that Jews historically did not produce art, and that even those wonderful illuminated manuscripts were decorated by the Christian artists. Today we know that we Jews do produce art. We do have ability to produce incredible art. We Jews are able to make revolutions in the art world. We produce beautiful pieces of art. But the question is still there. The question, who decorated these manuscripts for Jews? It's clear that the commissioner of Haggadah was a Jew. The scribe, the sofer, was a Jew. But what about the artist? One argument says that, look, in the Middle Ages, whoever wanted to exercise certain profession had to belong to a guild. And guilds, most of the guilds, were closed for Jews. So whoever wanted to become a professional artist had to become the member of the artistic guild. But they did not accept Jews. So this would be the argument for the theory that the Haggadot and other manuscripts were decorated by non-Jews. But then the other argument would be that at least the very rare, but still there are examples that exist, examples with colophons that clearly mention the names, the Jewish names of the artists, and that to produce works for the needs of the Jewish community, not to sell in the open market, but to produce it for the needs of the Jewish community, Jews were able to study art, for example, from the Christian books that they saw, and exercise it themselves. Where did Jews see Christian books? Very simple. Remember, the Jews in medieval Europe were moneylenders. So when you lend the money to someone, you want to take something from this person as a guarantee that he will return your money. And so very often the religious items were brought to Jews to receive money from them. They could be goblets, they could be even crosses, they could be manuscripts, because manuscripts were very, very, very expensive. And there were even discussions. There was a discussion in Catholic Church whether it was allowed or prohibited to give Jews any of those religious objects. And there were also discussions among Jews whether it was okay to receive those objects, whether it was okay to use them, for example, goblets or cups or dishes. So we know that this practice existed, and we understand that Jewish artists were able to study from the Christian manuscripts to understand the paints, to understand the technique, to understand the fashion, the innovations of the time. Still, the question is open, and there is no one answer to it. As I mentioned already, the illustrations of Sarajevo Haggadah are open with the stories from Bereshit, the creation of the world. What we have on the screen right now, on the right, it's the page from the Christian book. See, it's the same story, the creation of the world. It goes left to right. There is an image of God here. He creates the universe, and then Adam, and then Eve, and then everything ends up with temptation. Quick. Now, in Sarajevo, Haggadah, the Jewish commissioner and maybe the Jewish artist created full story, represented full story. First of all, it goes right to left. So everything we see the sequence of images right to left. And we see how God, there's of course no image of God. Instead, there is light. And we see the division of light and darkness, and the earth and the water, and the vegetation, and the animals, and the human beings. And see, it's day 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and day 7, Shabbat. So it's very interesting that here we have this man, not God, not at all. It's a man, he's dressed very typical as the Catalonian Jewish men were represented. I'll show you in a minute. And he is resting. It's a Jewish manuscript, so we have Shabbat, the day of rest. How do we know this is the typical way of representing a Jewish man? We have this image on the right. It's not from Haggadah. That's a very anti-Semitic image. It's the altarpiece of the monastery here in Catalonia. It represents the traditional, one of the traditional accusations this against Jews, that they take that small piece of bread that is used for communion in Catholic Church, and they take it from someone in order to cut it with knife and see the blood of Jesus spelled out of it. So this man in blue, I'm only showing it to you, not to entertain you with anti-Semitic images, but to show you this is the way to represent a Catalonian Jew. See, he has this kind of a overcoat covering his body, and you see very similar type of clothing here. So we understand here we have a Jew rest here on the seventh day of creation. And then it goes to the story of Adam and Eve. See Eve raising out of Adam, the temptation. Look at the snake. In Christian tradition, snake normally had female head because everything bad comes from women. And then in Jewish manuscripts, you normally see the snake with normal snake head. And you have this moment when Adam and Eve are sent from Gan Eden, and you see Adam hardworking and Eve spinning to symbolize her hard labor giving birth. And then Cain and Abel, it goes further and further, and it comes to Noah, of course. Very soon, look at this. See this image of the Ark of Noah. When we look at the Christian paintings representing the same story, and we spoke about it recently when we had a virtual tour to Louvre Museum, and we are going to speak about it once again when we visit Vatican Museum, the virtual tour that I planned for the end of October. Normally in Christian tradition, the Ark of Noah is represented as a boat. In Jewish manuscripts, it's represented the way it should look like, as a big box, the way it's explained, right? And you have this story of sons of Noah not willing to look at their father naked. So the story keeps going, one image after another. A very, very, very special attention is given to the life of Joseph. His life is represented in every detail. Look at this wonderful image of Joseph dreaming. He's in his bed, seeing his dreams, and that's how we can witness a little bit the moment of the everyday life of the medieval man. We actually see that the slept wearing that little hat on their heads, and it was traditional in the Middle Ages to sleep kind of a half seated. It was suggested by the doctors for specific health reasons. And again, we see Joseph sleeping. We see Joseph in front of his father Jacob. We see the whole story and the moment Joseph was sold by his brothers. So interestingly enough, we've no answer. We have no answer why exactly in this very Haggadah the story of Joseph was told in every detail. For some reasons, for the commissioner of the Haggadah, it was very important. There is a connection between Joseph and Moses. So this upper picture with Joseph died, and then Moses being found by the daughter of Pharaoh in the river, and here you have the mother and the sister of Moses. And on the right picture, you see Jews coming to Egypt, and then Pharaoh is represented as Catalonia king, as a traditional European king, of course. The story of Passover is being told in details, one after another. All plagues are perfectly represented. Look at this very image. It's the 9th one, the 3 days of the darkness. Look what we have here. We have the Pharaoh, again, who looks like the European king. We have Moses, who came to talk to him. We have Egyptians sitting down there in the darkness. And we have Jews. ולכל בני ישראל היה אור. And we have Jews here, and because they have light, what do? They study. They sit at the table and read the book and study, and looking at their gestures, we understand that they discuss what they are reading. It's such a deep and such a deep understanding of the Jewish nature. Either the commissioner or the artist, or both of them, understood the Jewish life very well and represented such tiny details. When we have light, we Jews will sit, read, and study. It's very clear. Another very interesting image that we have here, we have the image of Holy Temple. The way the artist, the medieval Jewish artist, imagined it. And it has some architectural elements that the artists saw around themselves in their life in Barcelona. But also look at this interesting blue arch. This arch takes us back to the beginning of Haggadah. Remember, there were those blue arches on the pictures representing Genesis at the very, very beginning. On top of it, there is this flower, which also reminds us of the flower that we saw at the beginning, one of the symbols of the monarchy of Catalonia and Aragon. And also this whole construction, see, it reminds us a little bit when we come into the Gothic church, the Gothic cathedral, that what I have here on the photograph, the ceiling of one of the Gothic churches in Barcelona. We see those arches going up. And that's exactly what we have here. Seems that the artists, I believe it was Jewish artists. I think understanding Jewish life, understanding those moments of Jewish life is a good evidence that it was a Jew illustrating this Haggadah. He wanted to put everything, the best that he saw around him in this Haggadah, to glorify the history and the present day of the Jewish community. And that usually, very often, the Sephardic Haggadah are the images, the illustrations, end up with the story of Moses receiving Torah. And we have here Moses with tablets of Torah with 10 commandments and Jews surrounding him. Look at this little things. It's the photograph of the facsimile edition of the Haggadah. And so these are marks that were left by one of the readers of this Haggadah hundreds of years ago. This Haggadah has lots of small marks and lots of lots of marks left by the wine. So we understand it was actually in use every year. On the right, you have here the Jews crossing the Red Sea. Very interesting way of representing people, sea separated and then Jews going through it. And then the dance and the song of Miriam. We have Miriam and Jewish women dancing. And so we understand that in Sephardic tradition, in the tradition of the Jews of Spain, of the south of Europe, it was appropriate. It was appropriate to represent beautiful women in our manuscripts. They're beautifully dressed, they're gorgeous looking, they have very fine hair, and they dance and sing the song of victory. What else is very interesting? Another image that lets us look into the life of Catalonia Jews of the 14th century. It's Beit Knesset. It's the synagogue. Look at it. The Jews are leaving. They're coming out of the synagogue at the end of the prayer. There are men and women and children, and Aron HaKodesh is open. And it seems that there are women who stay behind to come closer to the Torah scrolls. And the Torah scrolls look interesting. They don't look typically Sephardic. They're not put into the wooden case, but what they actually remind us, if we go to Rome, if we go to Italy and come to the Museum of Italian Jews, that's what we see. We see those beautiful Torah covers with the crowns and gorgeous fabric. Interestingly enough, they look very, very much alike. Do we understand why? Do we really know why? Difficult to tell. But what we understand for sure is the Jewish communities of different territories were connected to each other, were very often well aware of each other, and the Jews traveled. And so they were able to exchange the traditions. And that's the only thing that's what we can think out of it. Everything else is our speculation because we have no facts. We don't know. The lamps here are the traditional Muslim style oil lamps that were in use in the Jewish homes. And I'll show you another lamp in a second. Look at this picture on the right. It's what is happening here. The Jews are receiving harasset on the top picture, and Jews are receiving matzah on the lower picture. Many Haggadot also included the process of baking matzah, and we know that very often it was organized publicly. So for the whole neighborhood, it was one big stove where the matzah for Pesach was baked and then given to all community members. On the left, this is a Jewish school. This is Rabban Gamliel and his pupils. You can clearly see what's going on. They read, they study, and he's teaching them, and he has a whip. For many, many centuries, the whip continued being the main teaching tool, the main educational tool, both for adults and for children. We know it from so many memoirs. It's still very close back, even 100 years ago, it was still a common practice in schools for boys to use the the whip to help kids study better. Look at this interesting image here on the left. It's the Passover Seder. See the family sitting at the table, and look, they have 3 Haggadot at the table. Wealthy family, very, very wealthy family. And see what's going on? There is something on the head of the boy. And it's a tradition which is preserved among several Sephardic communities even up to today. That there is a Seder plate, and before it's put on the table, it's brought and placed above like on the child's head, and then rotated so everybody can see. It's a tradition that exists today in many Jewish communities, and we see the representation of this tradition here on the pages of Haggadah. And there is another representation of the Seder. The family sitting at the table. Look at the beautiful matzah that they have, beautifully decorated. There is one hanging lamp here, and another one in the center. Such lamps, you can find them in the Jewish museums around Europe. It's even called a Shabbos lamp, the lamp for Shabbat. It's this, or some call it Jewish star because it looks like a Star of David. It's this bigger oil lamp hanging from the ceiling that will preserve the light for Shabbat. The question of this image that has no answer is this very person, the person with clearly darker skin, the person who is sitting down below but drinking and enjoying the Seder. There's no answer. There's no answer who this person could be. There are only theories and opinions. If we look, for example, at the drawing from the book called The Ceremonies and Costumes, the religious ceremonies and costumes of the people of the world. It's the book that was published in Netherlands in the middle of the 18th century, and the drawings were created by the wonderful engraver Bernard Picard. Some time ago, when we had a virtual tour to Rijksmuseum, I showed you some of his works. We see here the Pesach Seder in Amsterdam among Portuguese Jews, mid-18th century, and there's clearly a person with dark skin who is on one hand sitting at the table, he has a plate, but on the other hand, he's busy. He's clearly busy here, serving something at the table. We don't know if this woman is clearly a Black slave or not, or is this woman probably, does this person symbolize a guest, a stranger, a foreigner? Lots of theories. You can make up your mind the way you like, but no clear evidence of what this is. Another wonderful image here would be Maror. Some time ago, there was a big discussion. I think it was about like 10 years ago, a giant discussion what this image actually represents. It says maror. Okay, we understand that. But what vegetable is represented here? And the discussion was whether it's artichoke or a romaine salad. And the problem with artichoke is very serious today. You know that baked or fried artichoke is one of the most traditional and beloved Jewish dishes, especially the most traditional dish of Roman Jews. Quite recently, not that long ago, artichoke was proclaimed non-kosher by the rabbinical authorities of Israel because it may contain worms in it. So it was a giant scandal with real artichokes, and different Jewish communities in Italy made different decisions whether to continue eating the food that they love or change the recipe. And at the same time, it was a very big discussion. What image we actually see here? Is this artichoke or a romaine salad? It's interesting. I find it very, very interesting that we can look at those images and try to imagine life and try to go deeper into the details of life, which is several hundred years away from us. And what's interesting, see, I am Ashkenazi Jew mainly. I recently thought that maybe I have some Sephardic gene in my blood, so I might do some DNA tests soon. But as far as I know, my family, Bridget, has Ashkenazi roots. For Ashkenazi Jews of Northern and Eastern Europe, receiving a trog was the biggest deal of the year, a trog for Sukkot. It was very expensive. It had to be imported from far away. Here in the south, it was not such a big deal, but maror was very, very important. And we, in every Haggadah, we see a very particular attention given, very particular respect and attention given to maror. Even the pages that contain just text are beautifully decorated. Words are being surrounded with the colors and sometimes some images of exotic birds or animals and flowers. So it's entertaining to read the manuscript. And there are also pages that are very plain and they contain the lyrics, the poetry, the Jewish poetry of the 14th century. As I already mentioned, the history of Jews in Barcelona ended up in 1391. See, mid-14th century wasn't easy time. There was this terrible bubonic plague traveling around Europe, killing millions and millions of people. They say that up to 50 million people died around Europe. Europe lost half of its population. Jews also died, but less. But not as much as Christians. We understand today, but Jews had different standards of life, the hygienic standards. We wash our hands, we go to mikveh, we have our strict rules of what to eat, what not to eat. Average Christian neighbors of Jews could spend all their life not washing their hands. Jews used separate wells. Jews, also specialist Jews in Spain, valued garlic. Garlic was essential element of the Jewish cuisine. It was eaten a lot. Garlic was put on the at the front door. Garlic was put into the carb of the newborn baby. Jews believed it protected from the evil forces, but today we know that in fact garlic protects from viruses. It's a very important thing. So Jews were blamed very much. And so in 1390, 1391, they were riots against Jews. They started from the south of Spain and spread along the coastal line. So there was the massacre of the Jews in Barcelona, 1391. Some were murdered, others were baptized, and the rest managed to run away. That was the end. Some of them ran to the up to the north to France and then to Italy. Others run to the west to Castilla, to Spain, where they lived another 100 years up until Jews were expelled from Spain in 1492. We do not know when Sarajevo Haggadah left the territory of modern-day Spain, in 1391 or in 1492. We don't know that. But we know that its next stop was somehow in Venice, in Italy, in the famous Venetian ghetto. How do we know that? Right on the pages of this Haggadah, there is a deed written in Hebrew characters that confirms that this very manuscript was sold by its owner to another person in Italy in 1510. That's one thing. Another thing, look at this wonderful drawing here. Look at this lady and the gentleman. They do not look like Catalonian Jews at all. They look like Italian Jews who are getting married. She's having a ring on her finger. So it seems that this Haggadah was purchased to become a wedding gift of the Italian Jews. And there is another very important thing here. There is the signature of approval written in Italian. It's the signature of approval 1609, provided by a church censor named Giovanni Vistorini. We may think that censorship is bad. I can tell you that for Jewish manuscripts, censorship was good because starting from the 13th century, church tends to burn Jewish books. It was in the 13th century the Catholic Church learned that aside of the Bible, Jews also had Talmud and was very unpleased with that. And it started burning Jewish books, first in France and then it spread around Europe. So when finally the censorship was established, and it was agreed that instead of burning books, it was better to just mark out everything that was considered blasphemy by the Catholic Church, it was a good decision because at least the manuscripts and books were preserved. So we know that the Sarajevo Haggadah spent some good time of its life in Italy, in Venice, and then we also know that Venice had very strong contacts with the towns located on the shore of Adriatic Sea. Today they belong to Croatia. For example, Dubrovnik down here. And Dubrovnik, for much of its history, belonged to Venice and had significant Jewish community. So maybe our Haggadah traveled by boat from Venice to Dubrovnik and then from Dubrovnik to Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia. Maybe yes, maybe not. We don't know. Between Venice and Sarajevo, we have no idea what exactly had happened to this Haggadah. Maybe it belonged to some Jew living on this Jewish street of Dubrovnik. Maybe not. So it ended up in Sarajevo. Sarajevo today is the capital of Bosnia, and when we look at the picture, we already see that there's very strong Muslim influence. And it's true, Bosnia, much of its history belonged to the Ottoman Empire. It was the city where Muslims and Jews lived next door to each other for many, many centuries. Remember that after the expulsion of Jews from Ottoman Empire, so many of them found safe refuge in the Ottoman Empire. So after the expulsion of Jews from Spain, so many of them found safe refuge in Ottoman Empire. So we're coming to the final part of our topic, of our conversation. 3-4 more minutes. I'll show you a little bit of Sarajevo Jewish life, and this is one of the synagogues in Sarajevo. It was the Jewish community of Sarajevo. Historically, it was Sephardic Jewish community up until the early 19th century when the new wave of Ashkenazi Jews came here, the new wave of Austrian Jews. And it's true that if you talk to the descendants of Sarajevo Jews, you will hear the stories of coexistence. You will hear the stories of comfortable life with their neighbors, of Jews feeling comfortable and occupying prominent positions in the society. But in 1894, he was a boy from the impoverished Jewish family. The family name was Cohen. And it seems that the family lost the father, so they lost the breadwinner and they just needed money. He tried to sell the treasure that they had, this Haggadah, to someone. He first offered it to the director of the school, his Jewish school that he attended. And then the connections brought him to the director of the National Museum. So the Haggadah was purchased for the amount equivalent to about 7,000 US dollars of today. And then by that time, Bosnia belonged to Austrian Empire, changed hands. So this Haggadah was sent to Vienna to be examined and spent some time in Vienna and then was sent back to Bosnia more than 10 years later. In Vienna, while examining the Haggadah, what they did, they cut it. So they cut some of the pages, and that's how we do not see the very top of the pages. That's how we see only the half of Catalonia flag. So they studied it, and in 1898, the unique book was published, the Haggadah from Sarajevo. So it was Vienna scholars that named this Haggadah, the Haggadah of Sarajevo. And this is the first ever published book, the book dedicated to one single Jewish manuscript, and the first book ever published about the Haggadah. So this Haggadah became first to be publicly known, and this made it so incredibly famous. 10 years later, the family, Cohen family, Joseph Cohen, sent the message to the Bosnia Museum explaining that he sold this Haggadah because he had financial troubles. Now he has money and he would love to receive his manuscript back. Of course, his letter was never answered. And this Haggadah is proclaimed the World Heritage and the National Heritage of Bosnia, and it was not going to be given to anyone, of course. The time goes on. This Haggadah in the last century, in the 20th century, was in great danger. During the Second World War, Bosnia was occupied by the Nazis. Majority of Sarajevo Jews were sent to the extermination camps and murdered there. Those who survived thanks to the help of their neighbors. And the Nazis knew that there was this famous Haggadah in the Museum of Bosnia, and they came to the museum willing to confiscate it. And they were met by this man, a Muslim man, Dervish Korkut, the Muslim scholar and librarian and the curator of the National Museum of Bosnia. And he managed to hide Haggadah. And not only he managed to hide it, he hid it, but he was brave enough to stand in front of the German officer and tell him that no, we do not have it. It was another person before you who came and took it. And so he hid it and then secretly sent it to a small village of Bosnia where it was hidden in one of the local mosques underground. That's how the Haggadah survived the Second World War and was returned to the museum after the war. We'll come back to his story in a second. In the post-Second World War period, so many books were published dedicated to this Haggadah with the different texts, with so many studies were done on this manuscript. Remember that not that long ago, after the collapse of the Soviet system and the collapse of socialist Yugoslavia, there was this tremendous and brutal and tragic Bosnian War in early 1990s. During that war, Sarajevo was under the siege for about 4 years. It's tragic time. It's time when the Muslim population of Sarajevo was in great danger. And it's time when the Jewish community of Sarajevo supported and helped Sarajevo Muslims in every way they could, and supported Serbs and supported Christians. So during that war, Bosnian war, Jewish community of Sarajevo did everything to help their neighbors. The Haggadah was going to get lost forever because the museum was robbed. The Haggadah was found laying on the floor and rescued by the director of the museum just at the last minute. It was again at the edge of being lost forever. Since then, it was exhibited in the Bosnian National Museum. Much study was done on it. It was United Nations that helped in the restoration process of it and helped organizing the exhibition. The best Jewish scholars did their studies on this Haggadah, and I'll show you one of the books that is one of the best books that you can find. And as you maybe heard already, and I mentioned it in some of my emails, the whole reason why I do this talk today is that in August I opened up internet, and what I saw this public announcement made by the National Museum of Bosnia saying that from now on, the money that they collect from the sale of the book, Sarajevo Haggadah Art and History, it's the book written by the professor of Hebrew University, Shalom Tzabar, as well as the income from the tickets to see Sarajevo Haggadah are going to be sent to help Palestine because Israel is accused of genocide. The story hit me personally. I think it's such an exquisite anti-Semitic act when you take something that it was created by Jews, that is important to Jews, and you use it as a weapon against Jews. So I could not find any better answer than just offering you this free talk to let you learn more about this piece of Jewish art. Because what else can I do? Maybe if you're willing, you may want to send the emails to the Bosnian Museum explaining that this is inappropriate behavior on their site. The book that they're selling is this one, the Sarajevo Haggadah History and Art. Extraordinary book written by the best, the unique, incredible professor, Shalom Tzabar, the professor of Jewish art and folklore at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. I don't know what he feels about it, about his book, his work to be used as a weapon against Jews. I'm sure those of you who are interested in the story of Sarajevo Haggadah may have read the book by Geraldine Brooks, People of the Book. It's fiction. It's fiction, but it's absolutely wonderful fiction, telling fictionary story of Sarajevo Haggadah. And to finish our talk with something nice, not with the ugly actions of the anti-Semites, I will tell you that Dervish Korkut and his wife Servet, who are represented here, saved not only Haggadah, but also this young lady, Mira Papo, a Sarajevo Jew. She was a partisan. She actually ran away from Sarajevo. She joined partisan group, but then she was sent by her partisan squad to Sarajevo with a special mission. And this family, they saved her They accommodated her, they dressed her, presenting her as their distant cousin. They saved their life. Much later, after many decades later, in 1994, she submitted a form to Yad Vashem, and after some consideration, the family of Dervish Korkut was given the title the righteous among the nations. And then during the period after the Bosnian War, when Muslims were in great danger in Sarajevo, the daughter of Dervish and Servet Korkut came to the Jewish community in Kosovo with a photocopy of Mira's testimony, saying that I am the daughter of the righteous of the nation who saved Jewish soul during the war. And together with her husband and children, she was evacuated. She landed in Israel. In Israel, she met the son of Mira Papo. Later on, one of her sons converted to Judaism. It's an interesting story. This Haggadah is magical. Not only it survived the most tremendous events that you can imagine, but it also saved those who helped it survive. And if you're into art, if you're into Israeli artists, you may want to know the name of Ari Aroch, the artist who was born in Kharkiv in Ukraine, but then lived in Jerusalem. He created quite a few works inspired by the images of from Sarajevo Haggadah, including the creation. Look at this Moses from Sarajevo. See the Moses that reminds us the Moses that we saw in Haggadah. Look at this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 boxes. And number 6, we kind of understand it. Moses from Sarajevo with 6 boxes, reminding us of 6 million of Jews. Sarajevo Haggadah, because it's first to be known, became so well known and so influential in our culture. It's one of the greatest treasures that we have. And so I thank you very much for your kind attention. I apologize that our talk took a little bit longer than I expected. Before I come to your questions, I would like to let you know that at the end of October, I would love to invite you to virtually visit Vatican with me, where I'm going to show you some of the incredible Jewish secrets of Vatican, and I hope you will like that tour as well. Please expect the recording to be sent for you very soon, and I hope to see you again online at the end of October for our virtual tour of Vatican Museum. Thank you very much. Gmar Chatima Tova, Shana Tova. Have a fine Yom Kippur, meaningful Yom Kippur. Have a wonderful Sukkot with etrog and everything necessary. And let's see each other after the holidays, after Sukkot, after Simchat Torah at the end of October. Thank you very much. Stay well, stay tuned, and bye.